I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. Today is a good day, and it's a day that God has given us just to rejoice and be glad in him. I'm grateful to God to be in your presence. I'm most appreciative of those who provided the invitation, and I anticipate over these next few moments that those of you who have not been trained in the fine art of saying amen will at least look amen. My assigned text is Habakkuk chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. And I would like to tag this text in our exchange for today, Unbearable Burdens and Unexpected Answers. We spend too much time watching TV, too much time looking at Facebook, too much time checking our Twitter feeds, our Instagram accounts, as well as our Snapchat accounts. The problem with all of these digital media streams is that they tend to draw our focus away from the things that matter most. And if your focus is not centered on the essential, your heart will be scattered as much as your mind. In movie making, there is a particular job on the movie set called the focus puller. This individual's job is to make sure that the main character in a scene is clearly in focus. It's a job that requires working in literally millimeters to make sure that the story that is being told is told effectively because the main character stays as the center of attention and the center of focus. Today, as we look at this text, I hope to be your focus puller. If you were paying attention to the text, you saw that it's all about sight. The very first verse says the oracle or the burden. That word oracle is the Hebrew word that means a heavy load. This burden that the prophet Habakkuk saw, it's something that he saw. And if you will remember as you heard it read, he talks about in verse 3, he makes the complaint to God, why do you make me see iniquity? And why do you cause me to look on destruction? And God's ultimate answer causes Habakkuk to refocus his attention, because if you look at verse 5, God's unexpected answer is to look at things a little bit differently. So let's unpack it just a little bit. You understand that Habakkuk was serving in an era of cultural decay in the land of Judah. It was during a time of geopolitical upheaval where the Assyrian Empire was on the decline and Babylon was starting to make noise, to such an extent that really the prophecy, the little bit of prophecy that's in this book, really is about how God is going to use the Babylonians to ultimately fulfill his will. And so Habakkuk, whose very name means to embrace or to wrestle, has to wrestle with some things that he is seeing. He is seeing cultural decay that is spiraling down into violence. You see him sort of emptying the thesaurus to describe this decay. In verse 2, he talks about, I cry out to God, violence. I see iniquity. I see wickedness. I see destruction and violence and strife and contention. And not only is the culture decaying, and not only is violence taking root because of this cultural decay, but the law itself, according to verse 4, that which God has set up to restrain evil, the law is, the Hebrew word there is sluggish, it's feeble, it's ineffective. Some translations say paralyzed. So, here it is, the prophet has this heavy load on him, this unbearable burden of seeing the culture in which he lives in a downward spiral, strife, contention, violence. And at the same time, the law, that which God has provided to restrain evil, is not only sluggish, but the way it's being applied causes justice to come out perverted. So, cultural decay, perverted justice, twisted justice. But what he has to wrestle with is the fact that he knows he serves a good God. He knows he serves, if you look in your Bible again at verse 2, he starts out by saying, "How long, O Lord?" The word Lord there is the covenant-keeping name for God. You're the God who keeps his word. You're the God of Israel. And in light of what I know about your character, how is it that I see all of this happening? How is it that everywhere I look, I see a twisting, a perversion, iniquity? I see raw evil. I see wickedness just multiplying itself. And in the face of all this turmoil, the law itself seems impotent. But yet you're a good God. How can I reconcile this? How can I justify this given what I know about you, God? Well, let me say just in passing that we live in a culture that is decaying. We live in a time where violence is so prevalent that you can't go to the grocery store without being shot and killed. Where, when you think about it, even in this last week, as many tragedies as we have had, how many more tragedies there could have been had pipe bombs exploded in postal centers, where people who have survived the Holocaust are not able to survive American culture right now, where babies who are ceremonially given their name, those families now will have to always remember the tragic events that happened at the baby naming ceremony. We live in a time of cultural decay, but we live in a time where even the law itself is being perverted and justice seems aloof. And I want you to not allow the oversaturation of media to cause you not to feel the burden of this sin-sick, sin-cursed world. We live in a broken world. And the fact that all of the evil has not touched you yet does not mean that if you're part of the body of Christ, that you can afford not to be touched by it. Let me say it a different way. All of God's people are created in his image, and we can't afford to allow any of God's image bearers to be discounted, denigrated, or otherwise the subjects of violence without us feeling the unbearable weight of sin. Don't disengage. Don't disengage because of oversaturation. Don't glaze out. People's lives are being affected right now because of cultural decay and the perversion of justice. But how do we navigate this, given the fact that we know we serve a covenant-keeping God? How do we justify it? How do we navigate it, knowing that our God reigns supreme? Well, there's an unexpected answer in the text that I want to draw your attention to. In verse 5, while Habakkuk is looking and he's seeing all of these things going on around him, God tells him to look once again. Verse 5, he says, look, but I want you to zoom out. I want you to take a larger perspective. And I want you to look among the heathen nations, because I'm doing something that even if I explained it to you, you wouldn't believe it. So, there's good news and bad news. Good news is God is saying, I'm working. The bad news throughout the rest of the book is, I'm working and I'm going to use a heathen nation, Babylon, to come and render judgment on my people for their apostasy, their idolatry, and the way that they walked away from me. Now, the rest of the book, Habakkuk wrestles with God. This is very interesting. Habakkuk is this minor prophet who really doesn't actually give a message to the people of Israel. Habakkuk is really more like a prayer journal. It's really a recording of his complaint and God's answers, and then Habakkuk's final resolution based upon God's answers. It's really not a message to a particular group. It's really a reflection of what happened in Habakkuk's prayer closet. That's right. But God tells Habakkuk, the good news is I'm working. The bad news, I don't work like you think I ought to work. So let me see if I can't give just 2 or 3 affirmations for your application moving forward in these last and evil days, and then I will take my seat satisfied. Number 1, let me point out something that is just on the surface of the text, and that is this. Just because you don't see God working doesn't mean he ain't working. Listen, the text, God says, look out among the nations. Literally what he's saying is, I'm doing some stuff, and just because you can't perceive it doesn't mean it's not getting done. Do you know that the sun draws up from the bodies of water across this globe millions of metric tons of water every minute? You don't feel it, you don't see it. All you know is clouds bring rain, and rain flows into rivers that ultimately flow into oceans that go back up in evaporation to cause more clouds and to cause more rain. You don't understand it, but God is working. And the sun is one of his workers that is working silently all the time. Just because you don't understand photosynthesis doesn't mean it ain't working. The sun is working all the time. Personally, being a solar-powered person, I really appreciate the sun. My point is simply this. This world is traveling around the sun at 67,111 miles per second. You don't feel it, but we're moving. So just because you don't see God, just because you don't feel God, doesn't mean he ain't working and that he's not moving. So in your personal life, don't get discouraged. In your personal life, don't fall into despair, because the one that began a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. You don't have to understand how he's working. Matter of fact, you don't have to see how he's working. Just know we serve a working God. And here's the good news. I got to get off of this because I'm getting excited. Here's the good news. He's working while you're sleeping. He that keepeth Israel while you're sleeping. Here's how the psalmist put it. He says, lest the Lord build the house, they that labor in vain. Lest the Lord watch the city, watchman waketh but in vain. It's vain for you to sit up late, to rise up early, because he gives to his beloved even in his sleep. What you worried about, God already got it worked out. So rest in his character. Rest in his track record. Rest in his resume that he's a working God. And he works whether you can see it or you can feel it or not. Let me give you another affirmation. According to this text, when God says, look among the nations, be astonished, wonder, because I'm doing something in your days you wouldn't believe even if you were told, that suggests to me that God works in comprehensive ways on a scale too massive for us to comprehend. See, we're looking at checkers and God is playing chess, but he's playing three-dimensional chess. You ever see Star Trek, or is that past your generation? In Star Trek, Captain Kirk used to play three-dimensional chess. God is playing in infinitely multiple dimensions of chess, and he's moving pieces in ways that you cannot comprehend, but he is comprehensive in the way that he's moving. The text suggests, when he says in verse 5, look to the nations, really what God is saying is that I not only have your life in my hands, Habakkuk, I have the nations in my hand. That's what Daniel was talking about in the book of Daniel. If you read that, as that old king Nebuchadnezzar, as he had various dreams and Daniel will interpret them. If you read the book of Daniel, basically the point that Daniel ultimately makes is heaven rules. And heaven rules even through nations. Nations come, nations go, nations rise, nations fall, but ultimately there is one who owns it all, and he's moving nations just like so many pieces on a chessboard. But here's the kicker: the king always wins. Because, see, when you're playing chess, novice like myself, think maybe 3 or 4 pieces ahead, 3 or 4 moves ahead, pardon me. Intermediate chess players might think maybe 8 to 10 moves ahead, but a master chess player has thought the game all the way through before he or she makes the first move. And our God is a master chessman. He's moving, can I make it personal? He's been moving the pieces of your life to get you to this point in place, right here on this campus. When you look back over your life, there are no coincidences. It's all been providence. He's the one who got your mother and father together. They might not have planned you, but he planned you. He's the one. True. He's the one who designed you fearfully and wonderfully. Your skin tone, your hair texture, your body type, where you would grow up, and all the ways that he's led you even to this point in place. Because he has a master plan for your life, and that plan is good. He's moving. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to see it. Just know that he's working in comprehensive ways on a scale so massive that you can't comprehend it. Even if he explained it to you, you wouldn't understand it. But let me see if I can get my third affirmation. And then I'm almost done. Can you write this down? Because all belongs to him, he owes nobody an explanation. See, here's the unexpected answer to the question, how long and why and all these types of things. That ain't none of your business. God owns this piece. He's our creator. The earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. He created it all. He owes nobody an explanation for what he does with what he created. When I put on my suit this morning, this suit that is designed for me to wear, I didn't want my suit saying, wear that other suit you wore me last week. No, I bought you for a price. I get to wear you like I want to wear you. And if I want to wear a bow tie, I'm going to wear a bow tie with you. If I'm going to put a handkerchief in my pocket, I'm going to put it in there. And I don't want to hear nothing from you, suit, because you belong to me. You were made for me. Just let me feel you and take you where I need you to go. He owes us no explanations, because we belong to him. And those of us who have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, we've been bought with a price. Let me say this. So when I was growing up, my sister is younger than I by 6 years. When I was an older teenager, she was a younger teenager. She was concerned about her complexion, so she would buy, I believe it was Dove soap. They were supposed to be good for the complexion. She and I shared a bathroom. My father and mother shared another bathroom. One day, my father decided to come and take a shower in our bathroom. He saw soap there. It smelled good. He took it, took a really good shower. My sister came into the bathroom after him, and she could smell the aroma of the soap that she had purchased specifically for her complexion. And so as my father had his towel draped about him and was heading back toward his room, my sister confronted him and said, "Dad, did you use my soap? This is Dove soap. Don't you know this soap is specifically for the face?" My dad did not break stride. He did not turn around. He just hollered back over his back shoulder, "Face and fanny too." Which is another way of saying the owner of the house gets to decide how the implements of the house are used. And the owner owes no explanations. If I'm understanding this text correctly, this text is teaching us when God says to Habakkuk, as he's raising his complaints and his questions, that God really owes no explanations. But here's this last thing I'll say. Write this down. We can rest in God's character because whatever he decides to do is right. When you get done talking, when you get done raising your questions, which is fine, it's all right. The book of Job proves God doesn't mind us asking questions. But when you get done talking, just recognize that whatever God decides, we can rest in his character because we know that whatever he does is not only for his glory, but for our benefit. And so within the context here, God is giving an unexpected answer to Habakkuk's question, this burdensome question of, God, how can you be good? And you see all of these things going on around us that we know are not good. The unexpected answer is, step back and look a little bit closer and you'll see that I'm doing something bigger than you could imagine. It'll blow your mind because I'm going to use even evil people to bring about judgment. The Babylonians are going to be my choice servants. But don't you worry about it. I'm working in ways that you can't see, you can't understand. And I'm working for your good and for my glory. Ultimately, God explains to Habakkuk that since it's all about me, since I own this piece, since you can rest in my character, then here's what you need to do. Just recognize the just shall live by faith. When we rest in God's character, we don't go by what we see. The just shall live by faith, not by sight. Now, it takes Romans, Galatians, and Hebrews to unpack that little phrase. We don't have time to do that here today. I'm just challenging you to recognize that you can rest in God's character because whatever he does is right. Whatever he does is for his glory and for your good. And whatever he does is going to come out in a way that if you knew it, you would celebrate it right now. Let me say it this way. There's some shows that I like to watch on Netflix and on TV, and I've gotten into the habit now of paying attention to who the producer of the show is. I got in this habit back a long time ago when there used to be this show on TV called 24 with Jack Bauer. And he was a secret agent and this and that and other, all these types of things. I used to binge watch that. That's when I first got into binge watching. And one time I was trying to catch up on all of the 24 episodes, and I knew I had to go to sleep because I had work to do, but I wanted to see how Jack was going to get out of this last episode. Finally, by God's grace, I happened to let all of the credits run, and I saw that the actor who was the main character was also the producer of the show. So I went on and went to sleep because I knew that as long as the producer is the main character, everything gonna come out all right. His job is secure. There's gonna be another episode. Doesn't matter how bad it looks. As long as the producer is the main character, it's gonna come out all right. And I said that to say that I know the producer, and he is the main character. It's all about him. It's all about, now, let me give you this last little hook here. It's interesting how the New Testament uses this passage. Paul uses this verse, that is verse 5, Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 5. He uses it in his sermon in Acts chapter 13. And he makes the argument that Jesus not only is the Christ, that he was put to death by the evil intents of evil men, but because God is a master chess player, what they meant for evil, God meant it for good. And he was working out in a way that they could not comprehend, because had they comprehended it, they would not have put the Lord of glory to death. But because they did, now he's risen up with all power in his hands. And the Bible says he uses, in Acts chapter 13, he uses verse 5 to make a warning. He says, in other words, don't get caught up in what happened in Habakkuk's day, and that is, literally what he's saying is, God even uses judgment for his glory. That's what the cross was about. The judgment of God that should have rightly been poured out on you and I. God poured it out on his only begotten Son, because whatever God does is right, is for his glory and for our good. But he's working in ways that you don't understand. So there it was at the cross where I first saw the light, and the burden of my heart rolled away. It was there by faith I received my sight, and now I'm happy all the day.